On first night, Millionaire said, "I won't touch you until you apologize to my mother." But she broke him. Before we begin today's story, I just want to speak to my sweet, beautiful family, you, my amazing viewers. Honestly, my heart is a little heavy today. Many of you have been commenting, saying how much you love my stories, and I'm so deeply grateful. Truly, I feel your love, but there's something I must gently ask. Lately, many viewers are not watching the stories till the end, and because of that, YouTube is freezing the growth of this channel, and it's making it harder for Alcott stories to reach more hearts. So if my stories have ever touched your soul, made you cry, smile, or believe in love again, I kindly ask, please watch till the end. Your views, your time, your support, it keeps this small dream alive. If you love what I share, let me know in the comments. Tell me you watched it fully. Tell me if it made your heart feel something. Your words mean more than you know. Now take a deep breath, grab a cozy blanket, and let yourself feel today's tale. Because this one is about love, betrayal, heartbreak, and the most powerful kind of strength, the kind that rises from ruin. Welcome to The Ice Prince and the Firefly. Let the story begin. Liam Carter stood at the edge of the grand marble balcony of his Manhattan penthouse, staring out at a skyline he had conquered with bloodless negotiations and icy decisions. The city bowed to his empire, yet his heart remained untouched, preserved behind walls built long before his first million. With chiseled features, sleek black suit, and those arresting blue eyes that rarely blinked without calculation, he was revered, feared, envied, but never loved. At 30, he was a billionaire in dollars and bankrupt in emotion. The name Carter rang in the stock exchange like a war cry, but within his soul, silence reigned. His father's dying wish was the only promise Liam ever intended to keep. And that promise had a name, Alina. Their wedding was neither preceded by courtship nor followed by affection. It was inked like a business merger, sealed with ceremonial vows and silent gazes. Alina entered his life like a candle in a frozen cave, uninvited warmth in an unwilling world. Her presence was unmissable, not because of flamboyance, but because of the quiet confidence that curved her every step. Brown skin kissed by sunlight, lips that seemed sculpted to smile but carried the weight of unshed tears, and a figure that wasn't crafted for the runway, but for reverence. She wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic yet grounded. Where Liam's touch turned things into gold, hers turned them into memories. But he hadn't touched her. Not really, not yet. She spoke softly, and every word was laced with meaning. He responded with nods or cold silence, and yet she never stopped trying. On their wedding night, she looked like poetry wrapped in red silk, sitting by the window with jasmine oil still glistening in her hair. Liam had walked in late from a board meeting, barely glanced at her and said, "You can use the bedroom. I'll be in the study." She didn't flinch. She simply replied, "Good night, Mr. Carter," then turned to the moonlight, hiding her disappointment like a secret only the stars could know. Days passed like that, mechanical, controlled, void of intimacy. She decorated the dining room with warm lights and his favorite books. He moved them back to where they were. She left a handwritten note in his briefcase once, just a quote about trust. He didn't mention it, but the note stayed in his wallet, even when she walked barefoot into the kitchen at night to make herbal tea for his migraines. He never thanked her. But she noticed that the tea would always be finished the next morning. In the media, they were the dream couple, beauty and wealth, culture and capitalism. But behind the mansion's doors, they were two planets circling each other, close enough to feel the heat, but too proud to collide. Liam often watched her when she wasn't looking. He hated how her smile made his chest ache. He despised how her laughter made the mansion feel like a home. He feared her power, the ability to make him feel. For Alina, every glance from him was a puzzle, every silent dinner a heartbreak. She was raised on love stories and found herself trapped in a transaction. Yet she remained kind, not weak, just resilient. When Eleanor Carter, Liam's mother, entered the picture, coldness turned to cruelty. Eleanor saw Alina as an unworthy outsider, a thorn in the Carter legacy. But Alina never retaliated. She held her head high, walked with grace, and replied with dignity. Liam never intervened. He watched, like a coward cloaked in logic. Alina wondered often, was this marriage her prison or her test? Could a heart so frozen ever thaw? She tried to touch his soul with music, left soft piano melodies drifting through the halls. He shut the door. She tried sharing stories from her childhood, moments of joy, of pain, but he listened like a stranger reading foreign subtitles. Still, she never asked for love. She just wished he'd see her. And deep down, Liam did. He saw every tear she blinked away, every time her fingers trembled while pouring tea. But he didn't know how to cross that emotional bridge. The cost of vulnerability felt too high. His father had warned him once, to love deeply is to give someone the power to destroy you. So Liam stayed on his throne of glass, afraid to move, afraid to fall. And Alina, the firefly in his winter, continued to glow softly, bravely, beautifully. Their wedding photo hung in the hallway, framed in gold. Two perfect faces, no joy in their eyes, a lie carved in crystal. And yet, somewhere behind those eyes, something stirred, a story not of love at first sight, but love that might still be born from frost. The ice prince hadn't melted, but he had begun to feel the heat. And Alina, though bruised by silence, hadn't stopped shining. She was not waiting to be rescued, only to be seen. Eleanor Carter moved through the mansion like a ghost of old royalty, her heels echoing against cold marble, her judgment heavier than chandeliers above, draped in designer silks and sharp diamonds. She wore disdain as effortlessly as perfume. After Liam returned to his empire of boardrooms and silence, Eleanor turned the house into her battlefield and Alina into her target. Each morning began with backhanded compliments. "That dress is bold for your skin, dear," followed by lingering glances that said more than words. At breakfast, she picked apart Alina's pronunciation of croissant, or smirking behind her bone china teacup. At lunch, she left fashion magazines open on the table, circled images of pale, blonde women in red ink. The message was subtle but brutal. "You will never be enough for my son." Alina, raised to respect her elders, swallowed every insult like acid masked in honey. She smiled when she wanted to cry, and nodded when her voice begged to scream. At night, she wrote letters to her mother back home, but never mailed them. She couldn't admit defeat, not yet. Every step she took in the mansion was monitored. Her laugh was called too loud, her silence too cold, her kindness too fake. Eleanor even accused her of manipulating Liam with her body, as if affection was a weapon Alina dared not draw. And yet day after day Alina tried. She offered to cook Eleanor's favorite dishes, only to have the kitchen locked. She suggested watching old family videos together, only to hear, "My memories don't need your face in them." The cruelty wasn't sudden, it was surgical. A slow, slicing erosion of dignity. One rainy afternoon, Eleanor entered the sunroom where Alina was watering plants, a ritual she'd started to calm her nerves. "Do you even know what real class looks like?" Eleanor snapped. Alina turned, watering and trembling in her hand. "Is it in your jewels or in the way you make people feel small?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed like daggers. "Your marriage to my son was charity. Don't forget that." The words pierced deep, but what followed was the breaking point. Eleanor grabbed the framed wedding photo from the mantel and said, "This doesn't belong here." She tossed it across the room. The glass shattered, just like something inside. Alina, with shaking hands and eyes glazed with held-back tears, Alina whispered, "What exactly is my crime? Loving your son? Or just existing in your perfect little world?" Her voice cracked, and for the first time it carried weight. Eleanor froze, her eyes flickering with the fear of losing control. Then, like a rehearsed performance, she dropped to the floor in theatrical sobs. The house staff scattered. Alina stood there unmoved, not from cruelty but exhaustion. She had no more strength to beg for humanity. When Liam walked through the front doors, later that evening, briefcase in hand, tired but alert, he saw his mother collapsed on the couch, clutching a tissue like it was evidence. "She yelled at me," Eleanor sobbed. "She called me cruel. She broke our family photo." Liam's face stiffened. "Why would she do that?" Eleanor paused, just long enough for guilt to look like truth. "Because I told her she wasn't ready to be your wife." Liam didn't ask for Alina's side. He didn't look for context. He stormed up the stairs, eyes blazing. Alina met him in the hallway, her expression unreadable. Eyes hollow from days of emotional whiplash. Before she could speak, his hand struck her cheek with the sharpness of every unspoken assumption. The sound echoed through the mansion like thunder. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stood still, palm against her face, pride bleeding beneath the skin. "You insulted my mother," Liam spat, each word dipped in venom. "I won't touch you until you apologize to her." Alina's voice was soft, but it held the weight of everything she'd endured. "I haven't committed any mistake. Why would I apologize for surviving your family?" Liam turned away, not knowing he had just created a fracture deeper than betrayal. That night, Alina sat by the broken wedding photo, taping its edges alone. She didn't weep. Her tears had dried long before the slap. Upstairs, Eleanor sipped wine with a smile of victory. Unaware that poison never kills the victim first, it always returns to its source. Liam, pacing in his study, felt something unfamiliar crawl through him. Not guilt, not yet, but a discomfort he couldn't name. The Ice Prince believed he was punishing rebellion. What he didn't know was that fire doesn't die under pressure. It learns to burn without air. And Alina, for the first time, was done waiting for warmth from frozen hearts. The days bled into weeks, each one more hollow than the last. Like faded pages of a book, neither of them dared to open again. They moved within the same mansion like two shadows cast by separate suns, breathing the same air but sharing none of its warmth. Mealtimes were silent performances, their chairs inches apart and hearts miles away. Alina spent most of her time tending to the garden or reading in the sunroom, not because she found joy there anymore, but because it was the one place where Eleanor's scent of control didn't linger. Liam immersed himself in contracts, acquisitions, and deadlines, convincing himself that the world outside required more from him than the woman within his own walls. But even he noticed the change, how Alina stopped setting the table for two, how her smiles became reserved for strangers, how her eyes no longer softened when he walked into a room. It wasn't indifference, it was retreat. The wound he had carved with his own hand had become a chasm. Then came the storm. That evening, the sky cracked open with thunder and poured its sorrow over the city. A symphony of rain tapping against their windows, like the ghosts of forgotten apologies. Liam arrived home later than usual, drenched in his own silence, loosening his tie as he entered their bedroom. The lights were dimmed low, casting a golden hue across the room, and the faint scent of jasmine hung in the air like a memory trying to return. He paused at the doorway, struck still by the vision before him. Alina emerged from the bathroom, her skin glistening with droplets of water, her wet hair falling in dark waves down her back. She wore a red silk nightgown that didn't scream seduction, it whispered liberation. It clung to her curves like poetry clings to pain, delicate and powerful. Her bare feet moved across the floor with quiet grace, and she didn't look at him, not out of defiance, but detachment. She was not dressing for him. She was no longer living to be seen. But Liam saw her now, not as the fragile girl he once ignored, not as the obligation tied to his father's promise, not even as the wife he had wronged. He saw her as Alina, the woman who endured, who rose, who still burned even when buried in ash. Something shifted inside him, not guilt, not lust, but recognition. His breath caught in his throat, not from desire, but from the ache of everything he had missed. As she passed him, her fragrance of jasmine and rose wrapped around him like a memory come alive. He reached out gently, fingers brushing her wrist, not with force, not with command, but with a question he didn't know how to phrase. She stopped. Silence spread between them, vast and trembling. She didn't look back, but she didn't pull away either. Liam stepped closer, the weight of 1,000 unsaid things trembling in his hands. He turned her gently toward him, his thumb brushing the edge of her cheek, and for a breathless moment she let him. Her eyes met his, wide, uncertain, bruised by betrayal, yet still shimmering with something that hadn't died. He didn't say her name. He didn't say sorry. But in the way he looked at her, she could feel both. His fingers grazed her face, like he was memorizing her all over again. And when he leaned in, their lips met, not with hunger, but with hesitation and hope. It was not a kiss of possession. It was a kiss of permission. The room around them disappeared. Time blurred. Their breaths slowed into rhythm, and when he rested his forehead against hers, they both knew something old had broken and something new had begun. He led her to the bed, not as a conqueror, but as a man humbled. The night unfolded in soft whispers and reverent touches, every movement a silent apology, every heartbeat a vow he couldn't yet speak aloud. There was no rush, no urgency, only the slow unraveling of walls long held. Her hands didn't tremble this time when they traced his shoulders, and he didn't flinch when her lips pressed against his scars. Their bodies moved like two languages, learning each other from the start, every gesture sacred, every sigh a song of second chances. He kissed her palm as if it were holy. She clutched his shirt, like it was the only anchor in a sea she had finally dared to dive into, and when the storm outside raged its loudest, their silence inside became the calmest it had ever been. They didn't speak, not because they lacked words, but because the words would have only diminished the purity of that moment. That night, in a mansion built on ice, fire danced freely for the first time. It was not a reunion of lovers, it was the birth of love itself. Morning filtered softly through the curtains, casting golden streaks across tangled sheets and unspoken truths. Alina stirred first, her body aching not from the tenderness of the night before, but from the weight of expectations that would surely return with daylight. She glanced beside her and found Liam already awake, his back turned to her, staring out the window as if searching for a version of himself he didn't yet know how to face. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He simply rose, adjusted his cufflinks, and left the room with a stiffness that sliced through the fragile calm they had built the night before. Alina sat up slowly, wrapping the red silk robe around her as though it could protect her from the sting of his silence. There was no note, no thank you, no apology, just air that felt heavier than usual. That morning, something inside her snapped, not from anger but clarity. She realized she had given him her vulnerability, while he guarded his like a secret locked behind castle walls, and she was done waiting at the gate. She made herself breakfast, not out of routine but rebellion. She cleared his plate without resentment. She dressed in her softest beige kurta, clipped her hair back, and sat at the vanity not to impress him but to recognize herself. That day she began her quiet revolution. While Liam buried himself in spreadsheets and mergers, Alina opened her laptop for something new. Not distraction, but direction. She enrolled in an online business course, scribbling notes with the same hands that once trembled beneath his touch. By the end of the week, she had drawn up designs for a small clothing line, modest, elegant, powerful. She began working discreetly with a local charity that helped immigrant women find shelter and skills. Every stitch she sewed, every lesson she learned, was a brick in the home she was building within herself. She no longer moved quietly through the halls like a shadow. She laughed on phone calls, made lists on the fridge, and wore confidence like perfume. Liam noticed. He watched her in stolen glances, the way her eyes now held focus, how her lips curved more often with self-made joy. There were moments he wanted to say something, ask what she was working on, tell her he saw her. But the words curdled behind his teeth, poisoned by pride. He'd pace outside her door some evenings, hand raised to knock, only to walk away. One night, he found her asleep in the library, head resting on a stack of business textbooks, pen still clutched between her fingers. He didn't wake her. He just stood there, guilt pricking him like thorns from a rose he never watered. He was watching her grow from the sidelines, and the more she bloomed, the more he feared she no longer needed him. Alina still felt the ache of his distance, like a ghost haunting a house. She no longer feared, but she refused to let it define her. One morning, she walked into the dining room in a simple white dress she had designed herself. It fit her like strength made visible. Liam looked up from his coffee, his usual stoicism faltering. For a second their eyes met. Hers were calm, assured. His were stormy, lost. "Going somewhere?" he asked, voice low. "To a meeting," she replied, tying a sleek belt around her waist. "For what?" he pressed. "For me," she said, smiling, before walking past him with the scent of resolve trailing behind. That answer lingered longer than her presence. Liam sat still for a long time, the question echoing louder than before. When did she stop needing me? And why did that hurt more than being hated? His pride warred with regret, but he couldn't admit either. Meanwhile, Alina's world expanded beyond the walls he had once confined her to. She was becoming the woman she was always meant to be, not in reaction to pain, but in celebration of her own strength. She no longer looked for him in every corner of her day. She had found herself in the space he left empty, and that, more than any distance between their bodies, became the silence that screamed the loudest. The days grew colder not because of the season, but because the air between Liam and Alina had thickened with unspoken truths and fractured trust. Eleanor, watching from her velvet throne of entitlement, sensed her grip loosening on the mansion, on her son, on the woman who refused to break. The more Alina glowed in her quiet victories, the more Eleanor burned with resentment. She could no longer tolerate Alina's presence, the grace she carried despite cruelty, the independence she forged from rejection. One evening, as Liam returned from a tense board meeting, Eleanor intercepted him in the grand hallway, her face twisted into rehearsed grief. "I didn't want to tell you," she whispered, voice trembling just enough to seem genuine, "but I saw something. Alina with that client of hers, the one always calling. They're more than business, Liam. She's cheating on you." Her lie slithered into Liam's ear like poison. The name she uttered, Daniel Rios, struck a chord. He had seen Alina laughing on a call once, radiant and carefree. He had chosen not to ask. But now, insecurity and pride reared their heads. Instead of questioning, instead of listening, Liam did what he always did when emotions outpaced logic. He assumed, and he destroyed. Bursting into the main hall, where the staff were gathered for a midday briefing, he spotted Alina handing charity flyers to the house manager. Her face lit up when she saw him, until it didn't. Liam's eyes were ablaze, not with love, but with accusation. "Was I never enough?" he barked, voice slicing through the room like shattered glass. "Did you find what you needed in your meetings with Daniel?" The room froze. Alina blinked once, trying to understand the storm that had descended without warning. "What are you talking about?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a calm that only comes from innocence. "Don't play innocent with me," Liam shouted. "I should have known from the start. You fooled me, you fooled everyone." Alina stood still, her hands clenched at her sides, her dignity the only armor she had left. But her eyes filled with quiet agony. "You never asked," she said, tears escaping despite her strength. "You never trusted me, not even once. I was your wife, Liam, not your prisoner." Her voice broke on the last word, not out of weakness, but from the weight of betrayal, his, not hers. Around them the staff looked away, ashamed on his behalf. She didn't yell. She didn't defend herself with rage. She simply turned, her heels clicking against the marble like the final chime of a broken clock, and walked away. No suitcase, no goodbye. Just silence and dignity trailing behind her like a fading perfume. Liam stood there, chest heaving, anger cooling into confusion, confusion giving way to unease. Hours later, while pacing his study, he called Daniel's assistant in a desperate bid to validate his fury, only to receive a reality he wasn't ready for. "Mr. Rios?" the assistant said with polite surprise. "He's not available. He's at a retreat with his husband. Can I take a message?" Liam froze. Husband. The word landed like a bullet to the chest. The line disconnected. His knees gave way beneath him as the truth poured in faster. Then his guilt could block it. He had accused an innocent woman. He had humiliated her in front of strangers. He had believed his mother again, without a single moment of doubt. He stumbled to the mirror above the fireplace, eyes wild, jaw clenched. But the man looking back at him was a stranger, cold, cruel, unrecognizable. His fists clenched, and without thinking he struck the mirror. The glass cracked in a web of fractures, reflecting 1,000 versions of himself, each one more broken than the last. Blood dripped from his knuckles, but he didn't flinch. He needed to feel something real, The truth lay around him in shards. He had failed her not once, but many times. And now he wasn't sure she would ever let him close enough to fix it. The world beyond the iron gates of Carter Manor pulsed with energy and growth, and Alina had become a part of that. Rhythm, no longer confined by marble, floors or silken silence. Months had passed since she left behind the title of Mrs. Carter, and in that time, she shed not only Liam's name, but every chain his world once wrapped around her. In the heart of the city, in a modest apartment where sunlight spilled across clean white walls, as she began again. The first nights were lonely, yes, but they were honest. She cooked for herself, paid her own rent, and turned her pain into purpose. With nothing but a sketchpad, a thrift store sewing machine, and dreams she had buried under silence, Alina began to draw, vivid, emotional designs that blended her South Asian heritage with bold, modern lines. Each dress she created told a story, and those stories resonated. A stylist posted her work online. The photo went viral. Suddenly, people weren't just buying her clothes. They were buying her strength. By the third month, Alina had her first collection launched in a small but packed gallery in Soho. The models wore her truth on their bodies, and when the audience rose in applause, she didn't cry. She smiled. Because this victory wasn't luck, it was earned. Invitations followed. Charity galas, empowerment panels, press interviews. She sat on stages beside CEOs and activists, speaking not just about fashion, but about identity, pain, and the fire it can forge. Don't wait for someone to love you, she said during one interview. Be the love you thought you needed. That quote flooded social media. It was printed on T-shirts and journal covers. Her name became a symbol, not of scandal, but of survival. And with her earnings, she bought a cozy little apartment filled with books, candles, soft rugs, and no ghosts. It didn't have gold faucets or imported marble, but it had peace, and that was priceless. Far away, Liam Carter sat in his office, staring at spreadsheets that no longer gave him the high they used to. His empire was intact, his money doubled daily, but he felt empty, hollow. He hadn't heard her voice in months. Yet he thought of her every time the wind whispered through the curtains. One night, out of habit more than interest, he turned on the television, then froze. There she was, Alina, on a talk show, her posture regal, her smile effortless. She wore a cream sari with gold borders, her hair cascading over one shoulder. She wasn't the girl he married. She was something more, untouched by him now, unreachable, radiant in a way that mocked everything he thought power looked like. Your story isn't defined by who left you, she said on the screen. It's written by how you rise. Her words sliced through him like a quiet storm. She didn't mention him, not once, and that somehow hurt more than if she had cursed his name. Liam leaned forward, his chest tight. She had found herself, without his apology, without his money, without his love. He, on the other hand, had lost himself. Pride had cost him the only person who ever saw past his ice and tried to warm him anyway. She never needed him, not for validation, not for survival, not for success. And as he sat in his silence, watching the woman he once bruised glow brighter than any spotlight could hold, Liam Carter finally faced a truth that no boardroom could hide. He had always needed her, not as a possession, but as a lighthouse, a home. And now he was just a ghost she had outgrown. The city shimmered in gala lights, but the storm above didn't care. It poured relentlessly, washing the world in silver sorrow. Inside the grand ballroom, cameras flashed, and voices buzzed with admiration as Alina stood beneath a crystal chandelier, draped in a black velvet gown, stitched with gold thread. Her own design, bold and unapologetic. The stage was hers, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned every inch of it. She spoke with calm fire, her words laced with wisdom carved from wounds. Heartbreak doesn't end you, she told the hushed crowd. Sometimes it's the earthquake that awakens your power. Applause echoed, but her eyes scanned the back of the room like they were searching for a ghost. Outside, past velvet ropes and marble pillars, Liam Carter stood in the rain, soaked through his suit, a man undone. His blue eyes weren't cold anymore, they were desperate, haunted, full of everything he'd never said. Security hesitated, but Alina had spotted him. She stepped outside, holding an umbrella, her heels clicking like thunder against the stone. The cameras followed, hungry for scandal, but found poetry instead. Liam dropped to his knees in the pouring rain, water streaming down his face, but the tears were real. His voice cracked, stripped of its old arrogance. "I broke your heart," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "I let pride destroy everything sacred. I was a coward. But if there's even one corner of your life where I still belong, one breath, one scar, one shadow, I'll earn it. I'll become the man you deserved from the start. One day at a time, or none, if that's what you choose." The crowd had stilled, umbrellas frozen mid-air. Alina stared down at him, her face unreadable, rain glistening on her cheeks like pearls. There was no triumph in her eyes, only memory, ache, and the weight of healing. Slowly she knelt beside him, not out of surrender but strength. She placed a hand gently over his, her touch warm and calm, like summer after storm. "Stand up, Liam," she whispered, her voice barely above the rain. "If you want to walk beside a woman like me, you must walk, not kneel." And he did, slowly, as if rising from his own grave. The flash of cameras was relentless, but the story they captured wasn't of a billionaire's downfall. It was of a woman who rewrote her ending. As they walked away side by side, no hands held, no promises spoken, just a shared silence that said everything. The crowd parted not for him, but for her. She wasn't the girl who once waited at the window for affection. She was the woman who made storms kneel and empires rethink their meaning. And Liam, now fully human in his brokenness, knew that walking beside her wouldn't be a return, it would be a journey. One where he followed her lead, step by step, not to possess her again, but to learn how to deserve her light. The world didn't cheer for his redemption. It stood in awe of hers, because love wasn't about who returned. It was about who rose. And as their figures faded into the rain, two silhouettes under one umbrella, it wasn't a happy ending the world witnessed. It was a powerful beginning.